If you've listened to my monthly horror update, then chances are you'll know that I was completely blown away by the movie Come True, a Canadian science fiction horror movie written and directed by Anthony Scott Burns that came from nowhere and managed to scare me in ways that I couldn't accurately explain. I adored it. It was one of the most memorable new horror films I've seen for years. That's not going to change anytime soon. In fact, watching it again, I knew that I needed to come back to it and hopefully do it a bit more justice this time because it's that special to me. So, what is so special about Come True? Let's step back into the gloomy turquoise terrorscape of nightmares that you can never run away from. This is the terrifying world of Anthony Scott Burns' Come True. The first time that we meet our protagonist, Sarah Dunn, she is awakening from a disturbingly dark dream, wrapped up in a sleeping bag on the end of a slide in a children's playground. Sarah is a comparatively tiny figure in the landscape of her own life, a colourlessly sedate collage of quiet, lifeless streets and emotionless faces. As she goes about her strange routine, she seems increasingly tired and withdrawn and, well, ill. She sleepwalks through her life before retreating unwillingly into the arms of ever more alarming nightmares. In the end, for the sake of her own sanity, Sarah agrees to participate in a sleep study program in the hopes of getting to the bottom of her sleep problems. Once there, things start to become increasingly dark and increasingly disturbing. Sarah will soon find out just what the study she has participated in is seeking to deal with, but even her own knowledge won't be able to save her from the greatest fear of all, her own subconscious mind. Come True is a film about a protagonist on a journey, one to face her own fears and to try and find a way to overcome them. But right from the very first frame, things feel oppressive and unsettling. Sarah doesn't rage about her terrifying nightmares or open up to friends and family, because Sarah is a character who is all but emotionally isolated from the world around her. Her dreams aren't visions of terror, but elaborate, chilling, painterly landscapes of unfathomable, unsettling images, so pure in their irrationality as to seem almost literally transposed straight from the mystifying darkness of our own dreams. Through Sarah and her dreams, we are immediately shown the two most significant factors in Come True's makeup that contribute to its ability to really, truly scare us. First is Sarah herself. Diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, writer-director Anthony Scott Burns has spoken about the importance of conveying emotions through performance rather than through elaborate, wordy dialogue. Sarah isn't a densely written character overflowing with neuroses and personal problems and emotional arcs. She is, in the purest sense, a pencil sketch of a protagonist that allows us to live the events of her journey through the movie itself, without being distracted by the minutiae of her life. She is not defined by her history, and in the best nightmare tradition, we are introduced to her without even fully understanding everything about her. We are just thrown straight into her shoes and left to follow her journey. The specificity of densely defined character drama is eschewed, in favour of something more immediate and compelling. Sarah is transparent enough to be an avatar for the audience, but she is an avatar stripped of security and agency, the trappings of her life reduced to the contents of a bag, the clothes on her back, and a bicycle. She survives in the moment, like all the protagonists of our dreams, bereft of a personal narrative or history, always moving forwards and never looking back, her life never scrutinised, but merely a series of reactions to events. No matter how much we want to stop and take in the details of Sarah's life to ground ourselves in her world, the momentum of events carries us ever forwards because, like a dream, Come True is taking us onwards, directing our vision where it wants us to go, and not letting us acclimatise ourselves to where we are. We are Sarah, and Sarah is a distillation of our fears of being isolated and alone and helpless, with no one to turn to for solace to comfort us after our nightmares. Then we come to the dreams themselves. It would be unfair to the artistry that has gone into Sarah's dreams to show you them in full here out of context, because there's something so hypnotically unsettling about them. But let me just say this. I'm sure I remember having almost exactly one of these dreams myself when I was about 3 or 4. Genuinely, it's the earliest memory of a nightmare that I've ever had, and it stayed with me all these years, and I can literally distill it down to the completely irrational image of a jack-in-the-box and being, no word of a lie, scared shitless by it. It's like Anthony Scott Burns knows what I was dreaming about. Or, more disturbingly, that the central thesis of his movie is horrifyingly true, that all of our dreams are drawn from a single primordial well of our subconscious fears. Dreams are an innately scary thing, because we ultimately have no control over them. It's almost like there's a part of our brain that's doing its own thing. For centuries, people have tried to interpret the bizarre machinations of our dreams in the hopes of finding that they tell us something about ourselves that we are unaware of. But in the end, we will never fully understand why we dream about the things we dream about. Nightmares, though, that's another story. A particularly vivid or disturbing nightmare can really affect us, especially when we're young or vulnerable. Consistent nightmares can plague our lives and affect our ability to function. Sleep is how our body recharges itself, but when our dreams turn to nightmares, it's almost as though some part of our brain is working against us, throwing out damaging or horrific images, sometimes literal, sometimes metaphorical, that sabotage our entire body's ability to heal. It's as though there is a small cancerous parasite living within us that's slowly eating away at our only true safe space. What bizarre psychological quirks within us can prompt our brain to lash out like this? The only solace in a nightmare is in the knowledge that we will soon wake up from it. And even an especially scary episode can be banished with the words, "It's only a dream." But what if it wasn't only a dream? Come True takes arguably the greatest universal fear that we have, that of an utter destruction of safety, and turns it into an increasingly dark and oppressive nightmare. Horror films play many different tricks with us. Slasher films give us the fear of being hunted by a psychopath with a knife. Body horror films ask us to imagine the very transmogrification of our own flesh and blood into some horrifying new form. Even torture porn makes us squirm at something as visceral as prolonged and sadistic mutilation. Every subgenre has its roots in a specific fear of its audience, and it will succeed based on what it does with that fear, and of course how well it plays that particular fear out. But it also relies upon speaking directly to the audience, relying on them to react to what it's asking them to be afraid of, which is why some horror films scare one person but can seem laughably corny to another. We are all different, which is why it's so hard to pitch a horror film to an entire audience and expect them to be scared as one by it. Somebody once said that movies are where an audience goes to dream, a collective subconscious that we are all a part of. Come True transcends the need to press its audience's buttons by locating the point at which they feel fear, by playing with something that is universal to us all, dreams. But more than that, Come True isn't a movie that asks us to be genuinely afraid. This final point is what I believe is most effective about Come True. It never, ever bursts its own tension. The language of its horrors are rooted in something far more disturbing than a collection of archetypal images. There are no cathartic shrieks of terror, no loud bangs or gruesome set pieces, only a long, elegant glide into darkness, guided by the beautiful sounds of a Tangerine Dream-influenced soundtrack, as we are drawn inexorably to the heart of the nightmare, what Anthony Scott Burns himself described as a comfortable journey to somewhere uncomfortable. This isn't a slow burn, it's a beautiful, terrifying journey to the heart of our subconscious, where rationality is powerless and we are stripped bare before the true horrors of something much bigger and much more awesome than we can even begin to imagine. What if we were all powerless, small, insignificant, isolated specks, slowly being drawn towards a fate so incomprehensible that all we can do is to sit back and let it take us? Come True plays with huge, sweeping primordial fears of a truly Lovecraftian scale, where, as we plunge into the dark, unexplored reaches of our dreams, we are suddenly allowed to see something that has always been buried away from us in an effort to preserve our sanity. It allows us to glimpse the true power of a force that lurks within our world just out of sight, only ever glimpsed in our nightmares. And it never once suggests to us exactly what that force is, only that it is so powerful that even catching sight of it during our waking moments is enough to do us great harm, as we see when Sarah is triggered into a sudden violent seizure when she is presented with an image from her nightmares after she is awoken. Instantly we can see what even a fraction of the power of these images has when seen during a moment of rational wakefulness. As the lines between dream and reality are worn down by the experiments of the Institute, we can see just how dangerous and doomed this venture will ultimately be for all involved, in their efforts to master a force so primal that it has been buried away from us all for the sake of our own sanity. It is something that lives within us all, connects us all. And against these forces, Sarah is a small, vulnerable speck, carried forth by the momentum of her own dreams, plunged into a dangerous journey deep into her subconscious, totally unequipped to deal with what she finds there. Sarah is us when we dream, powerless to be buffeted by the forces of the subconscious. Her fears are our own fears of vast, irrational powers stirring in the darkness, out of the corner of our eyes, glimpsed in our dreams, banished from our waking mind for our own sakes. Come True is elegant and beautiful and intensely, intensely unsettling. The truest transcription of a genuine nightmare ever put on screen, because its fears are always closing in, always just out of sight, but we know that we have to escape them because there is nothing we can do against them when they catch up to us, which of course, inevitably, they will, one way or another. Come True is terrifying.